September 1968. The skies above North Vietnam. The air inside the cockpit of the MiG-21 aircraft is thin, cold, and smells of ozone and sweat. Pilot Nguyen, a seasoned ace of the Vietnam People's Air Force, scans the horizon. He is confident. He has every reason to be. For the last 3 years, the skies have belonged to him and his comrades. They are flying the pride of the Soviet Union, a nimble, delta-winged predator designed to intercept nuclear bombers. Against him is the American F-4 Phantom. The Soviet advisors on the ground call the American plane a brick. It is heavy, it smokes like a steam train, and it relies entirely on missiles that frequently fail. In a turning fight, a knife fight in a phone booth, the MiG-21 aircraft should eat the Phantom alive. That is the physics, that is the doctrine, that is what the manuals from Moscow say. But today, something is wrong. Nguyen spots a pair of phantoms below him. He initiates the attack, diving to gain speed, expecting the Americans to panic and hit their afterburners to run away. That is the standard American procedure. Speed is life. But the phantoms do not run. They brake hard. They pull vertical. This is the first anomaly. Nguyen smiles behind his oxygen mask. He knows the Phantom cannot sustain a high G turn without bleeding all its energy. He pulls his stick back, bringing the nose of his silver MiG fighter around to cut them off. He waits for the American pilot to make the fatal mistake of trying to turn with him. He watches the Phantom's nose position, waiting for the buffet, waiting for the heavy American jet to stall. But the stall never comes. Instead of wallowing in the air, the Phantom executes a vertical rolling scissors maneuver with terrifying precision. It is a move that requires an intimate, almost supernatural knowledge of the MiG-21 aircraft's specific energy retention limits. The American pilot isn't just flying his own plane, he is flying as if he knows exactly what Nguyen's gauge is reading. The American jet slips behind the MiG. Nguyen slams the throttle forward, engaging the afterburner, trying to use his superior climb rate to escape. The Phantom matches the climb instantly. It is anticipating the move before Nguyen even makes it. Panic sets in. This is impossible. The Americans are clumsy. They are supposed to be reliant on technology, not airmanship. "Brake left! Brake left!" the ground control intercept officer screams over the radio in Vietnamese. Nguyen brakes left. It is a trap. The second Phantom is waiting there, positioned exactly at the blind spot of the MiG-21 cockpit visibility, a structural flaw that only a MiG pilot should know about. A Sidewinder missile leaves the rail of the American jet. There is a flash, a concussion, and the sky turns into a spinning blur of fire and metal. The aftermath. Kep Air Base, North Vietnam. Silence hangs heavy in the briefing room. Soviet military advisors stand around a table covered in flight maps and radar plots, cigarette smoke curls under the hot lights. These men are veterans of the Great Patriotic War, hardened experts sent by Moscow to ensure their technology humiliates the West. For years, the statistics were comforting. The kill ratio in the skies over Vietnam was favoring the communist forces. The Americans were losing sophisticated multi-million-dollar jets to cheap, rugged Soviet fighters. It was a propaganda victory of immense proportions. The MiG was the king of the Cold War skies. But in the last few months of 1968, the reports have changed. Colonel Yuri Volkov, a senior technical advisor, stares at the radar tracking data from the morning's engagement. He traces the flight path of the American F-4 Phantom with a grease pencil. His hand stops. He looks up at the other officers, his brow furrowed. "Look at this," Volkov says, his voice low. "Look at the energy management here." He points to the tight loop the American jet performed. The Phantom is aerodynamically incapable of winning a turn-rate fight against a MiG-21 aircraft at this altitude. If he tries this, he stalls. He spins. He dies. But here. Volkov taps the paper. He holds the edge of the envelope perfectly. He pushes the Phantom to the exact point where the MiG loses lift, but not 1 kilometer per hour faster. "Luck," another officer dismisses, flicking ash onto the floor. "The American cowboy got lucky. Once is luck." Volkov snaps. "Twice is coincidence." "But this? We have seen this pattern in 3 engagements this week. The Americans are not locking onto us with better radar. They are not shooting us with better missiles. They are outflying us." He pauses, letting the implications sink in. "It is as if they have the manual," Volkov whispers. "It is as if they have flown this plane themselves." The room goes quiet. The idea is ludicrous. The MiG-21 aircraft is the most guarded secret in the Soviet arsenal. Its specific flight characteristics, its corner velocity, its stall warnings, these are state secrets locked behind the Iron Curtain. The Americans have blurry photographs and intelligence estimates, yes. They have radar signatures. But they do not know how the stick feels in a high G turn. They do not know the vibration of the engine at 10,000 meters. To suggest the Americans know the plane better than the pilots flying it is treasonous. It implies a breach of security so catastrophic that it would mean the end of Soviet air superiority. Check the maintenance logs, the senior commander orders, breaking the tension. Perhaps our engines are underperforming. Perhaps the Vietnamese pilots are fatigued. Do not invent ghosts, Comrade Volkov. Volkov nods, but he is not convinced. He looks back at the radar plot. The geometry of the kill is too perfect. It is clinical. It is surgical. Across the ocean, thousands of miles away, the Soviet design bureaus, the famous OKBs, are sleeping soundly. Mikoyan and Gurevich, the fathers of the MiG, believe their creations are invincible. They believe their secrets are safe. They have no idea that the nightmare has already begun. If you want to uncover the secrets that changed the course of history, make sure to subscribe to Cold War Impact and hit the bell icon. We are digging into the declassified files that they didn't want you to see. The Invisible War. The paranoia begins to spread. It is not just the pilots in Vietnam who are noticing the shift. Intelligence reports filtering back to the KGB headquarters in Moscow are painting a disturbing picture. In the late 1960s, the United States Navy was in a crisis. Their Top Gun pilots were dying. Their missiles, the Sparrow and the Sidewinder, had abysmal hit rates, sometimes as low as 9%. The Pentagon was throwing money at the problem, building faster jets and bigger radars, but they were still losing the dogfight. Then, suddenly, the bleeding stops. The timeline does not make sense to the Soviet analysts. Developing a new fighter jet takes 10 years. Developing a new missile takes 5. Pilot training takes years. Yet, the tactical shift in the skies of Vietnam happened over the course of months. Back in the Kremlin, a classified report lands on the desk of the Minister of Defense. It details a series of strange intercepts. Soviet listening posts have picked up radio chatter from the American desert. Not from Vietnam, from Nevada. The signals are encrypted, but traffic analysis suggests high-intensity aerial combat training. This is normal. The Americans have the Nellis Air Force Base. They practice war constantly. But the radar signatures associated with these training flights are anomalous. The radar operators in Cuba and on Soviet trawlers off the coast of California have been trained to recognize the electronic fingerprint of every American aircraft. The F-4, the F-105, the A-4 Skyhawk. Each jet reflects radar waves differently. Each engine produces a unique acoustic signature. The report highlights a specific set of tests conducted in the middle of the night. The radar cross-section does not match an American plane. It is too small for a Phantom. It is too delta-winged for a starfighter. It looks, mathematically, like a MiG. Impossible, the minister mutters, tossing the file aside. They are simulating our aircraft. They are using drones. This is the comforting lie the Soviet leadership tells itself. The Americans are using target drones, remote-controlled planes, painted to look like the enemy. They simply cannot have the real thing. To acquire a functional, latest-generation Soviet fighter would require an operation of impossible complexity. It would require a defection so high-profile it would be international news, or a theft so brazen it belongs in fiction. But the seed of doubt has been planted. The warning signs. Deep within the Soviet military apparatus, a different kind of investigation begins. If the Americans aren't using drones, if they aren't using magic, then there is a leak. The KGB begins to scrutinize their own allies. They look at the Egyptians, they look at the Syrians, they look at the Iraqis. The Soviet Union has exported hundreds of these fighter jets to their proxy states in the Middle East. These nations are the front line against Israel, and by extension, against the United States. Security protocols are tightened. Soviet technicians in Cairo and Baghdad are ordered to conduct surprise inspections of every single airframe. Serial numbers are checked. Engines are verified. All aircraft accounted for, the reports come back. On paper, every MiG-17 and MiG-21 aircraft sent to the Middle East is sitting in its hangar or flying its scheduled patrols. There are no missing planes, there are no missing pilots. So, if no planes are missing, and the Americans are flying something that moves exactly like a MiG, what is happening? The confusion morphs into a deep, gnawing anxiety. The Soviet designers, the brilliant minds at the Mikoyan Design Bureau, pride themselves on asymmetric advantage. They build planes that are cheap, rugged, and agile, designed to swarm the expensive, complex American tech. They rely on the element of surprise. They rely on the fact that the American pilot in his multi-million-dollar cockpit has never seen a MiG-21 aircraft up close until the moment the cannon shells are tearing through his fuselage. That advantage is the cornerstone of Soviet defense strategy. But out in the Nevada desert, under the scorching sun of a place that doesn't officially exist, that advantage is being systematically dismantled. The Americans aren't just looking at the plane, they are dissecting it. They are taking it apart, bolt by bolt. They are learning how the hydraulic fluid smells. They are learning exactly how long it takes for the afterburner to light. And most terrifying of all, they are putting their best pilots in the cockpit. The Soviet leadership is staring at a puzzle with missing pieces. They see the result, their pilots dying in Vietnam. They see the symptoms, inexplicable American confidence. But they cannot see the cause. They are blind to the reality that their worst nightmare is parked on a runway at Groom Lake. The mystery is not if the Americans know, the mystery is how they know. And as 1968 turns into 1969, the search for the truth moves from the skies of Vietnam to the shadowed world of espionage and betrayal. The Soviets are looking for a ghost, but the ghost is made of aluminum and steel, and it is currently pulling 6 Gs over the Nevada test range. August 1966, Al Rashid Air Base, Iraq. The mystery of the American resurgence in Vietnam did not begin in Washington or Saigon. It began thousands of miles away, in the blistering heat of the Iraqi desert, with a man named Munir Redfer. Captain Redfer was a squadron commander in the Iraqi Air Force. He was skilled, he was trusted, and he was piloting the most sensitive piece of military hardware in the Middle East, the MiG-21 aircraft. To the Soviet Union, Redfer was a loyal asset operating their technology. To the intelligence agencies of the West, he was the golden ticket. For years, the Israeli intelligence agency, Mossad, had been working in the shadows. Their operation, codenamed Diamond, had a singular, audacious goal: to steal a MiG. They didn't want photographs. They didn't want blueprints. They wanted the physical machine. On August 16, 1966, Redfer made his move. On a routine training flight, he broke formation. He pushed the throttle of his silver MiG-21 fighter forward, diving toward the border. He crossed into Jordanian airspace, dodging radar, and eventually landed at Hatzor Air Base in Israel. The Soviets were furious. The defection was a diplomatic disaster, but in Moscow the analysis was contained. They believed the damage, while severe, was localized. Israel was a small nation. They assumed the Israelis would study the plane to defend themselves. The Kremlin convinced themselves that the Americans, the superpower with the massive ego, would never stoop to begging a tiny Middle Eastern nation for a look at a second-rate Soviet export. They were wrong. January 1968. Groom Lake, Nevada. The location does not appear on any public map. To the pilots flying over the Nevada test and training range, it is simply the box, a restricted zone of airspace that is lethal to enter. Inside this zone lies a dried-up lakebed and a cluster of hangars known as Area 51. Under the cover of darkness, a massive C-124 Globemaster transport plane touches down on the long runway. It taxis to a secluded hangar, far away from the U-2 spy planes and the experimental projects. The engines cut, the ramp lowers. Inside the cargo hold sits a shape wrapped in canvas and mystery. It is the MiG-21 fighter that Munir Redfer stole. The Israelis have loaned it to the United States Air Force. The project has a classified code name that sounds innocuous: Have Donut. As the American ground crews begin to unload the aircraft, the atmosphere is electric. For the engineers and test pilots gathered here, this is like meeting a mythical monster in the flesh. For a decade, they have been told that this machine is the ultimate predator. They have seen grainy reconnaissance photos. They have heard the horror stories from pilots in Vietnam who watched their wingmen vanish in a cloud of fire. Now, it is sitting on their concrete floor, the anatomy of a brute. The unboxing of the MiG-21 aircraft is a moment of profound cognitive dissonance for the American experts. They are used to the McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom. The Phantom is a triumph of American aerospace engineering. It is large, imposing, and finished with the precision of a luxury car. The panels are flush. The cockpit is filled with advanced avionics. It looks like $1 million because it costs $1 million. The Soviet plane looks agricultural. As the technicians strip away the coverings, they stare in disbelief. The aluminum skin of the MiG-21 aircraft is rough. The rivets are not flush with the surface. They protrude like pimples on the fuselage. To an American aerodynamicist, this is heresy. Drag is the enemy. Smoothness is speed. How can a plane with the finish of a farm tractor fly at twice the speed of sound? They open the access panels and find more shocks. The internal systems are shockingly simple. The brakes are pneumatic, operated by air pressure like the brakes on a heavy truck. The cockpit is painted a strange, nauseating shade of turquoise green. The experts puzzle over this. Is it some kind of radiation shielding? A psychological trick? Later, they would realize it was simply a color chosen by Soviet psychologists to keep pilots calm, but in the tense atmosphere of Area 51, it looks alien. The switchgear is rugged, heavy, and purely mechanical. There are no delicate computers. There are vacuum tubes. "It's a flying stovepipe," one engineer mutters, running his hand along the intake cone. "It's a tube with wings and an engine." The disdain is palpable. The American engineers, steeped in a culture of high-tech sophistication, look at the Soviet jet and see junk. They see a lack of refinement. They see a country that cannot manufacture flush rivets. They begin to wonder if the intelligence reports were wrong. Is this really the machine that is terrorizing the skies? But the test pilots see something else. Major Joe Jordan and the other pilots selected for the program walk around the small jet. They notice the size. It is tiny compared to the Phantom. It is hard to see. They notice the massive engine outlet. They notice the swept-back delta wings. While the engineers mock the build quality, the pilots feel a chill. They realize that the roughness doesn't matter. The Soviet philosophy is not about luxury. It is about lethality. The plane is light. It is stripped of everything unnecessary. It is a bullet with a cockpit. The second gift, Project Have Drill. As the Americans are puzzling over the MiG-21 aircraft, fate hands them another piece of the puzzle. In August 1968, 2 Syrian pilots flying MiG-17 aircraft get lost. It is a navigational error of catastrophic proportions. Thinking they are landing in Lebanon, they touch down at an airfield in northern Israel. They are greeted not by friends, but by the Israeli Defense Forces. The MiG-17 fighter is an older design than the MiG-21 aircraft. It is subsonic. It has no radar to speak of. It is armed with cannons, not missiles. By 1968 standards, it should be a museum piece. But in Vietnam, the obsolete MiG-17 aircraft is killing American jets just as effectively as the newer MiG-21 aircraft. It is slow, but it turns on a dime. It draws the fast American jets into a slow-speed turning fight where the Phantom's engines stall and the MiG's cannons tear them apart. The Israelis, once again, make a quiet phone call to Washington. Within weeks, the Syrian MiG-17 aircraft are disassembled and loaded onto transport planes. They join the MiG-21 aircraft at Area 51. This second program is codenamed Have Drill. Now, the Americans have the complete set. They have the high threat, the supersonic MiG-21, and the low threat, the agile MiG-17. They have the enemy's sword and their shield. The language barrier. The immediate problem at Groom Lake is not flying the planes, it is reading them. The cockpits are labeled in Cyrillic. The gauges use the metric system kilometers per hour, meters for altitude. American pilots are trained in knots and feet. A misunderstanding of a single dial could be fatal. A frantic effort begins to Americanize the cockpits without altering the weight or balance of the jets. Labels are taped over the Russian text. Gear up, flaps, fire. The airspeed indicators are red-lined at the danger limits. But there is no flight manual. There is no checklist. The Americans have to reverse engineer the procedures. They have to guess the startup sequence. They hook up a power cart to the MiG-21 aircraft. The Tumansky engine whines to life. It is a guttural, throaty roar, distinct from the smooth hum of American turbines. The smell of foreign jet fuel and hydraulic fluid, a scent described by pilots as smelling like rotten vegetables and turpentine, fills the hangar. The mystery deepens for the analysts. They run the engine on the ground and measure the thrust. It is powerful. But the engine life is short. The logs from the captured planes suggest the engines need to be overhauled every few hundred hours. American engines last thousands of hours. They build them like ammunition, an analyst notes in a classified memo. They are disposable. They fly them, break them, and replace them. This is the first crack in the cultural understanding. The Americans build planes to last 20 years. The Soviets build planes for a war that might last 20 days. The trap is set. Back in Moscow, the silence from the desert is deafening. The KGB knows the planes are in Israel. They suspect the Israelis are flying them, but they have no idea that the United States has established a dedicated Red Squadron in the Nevada desert. The Soviet designers are still sleeping well. They know their aircraft have flaws, poor visibility, short range, but they are confident that the Americans are too arrogant to understand the Soviet way of war. They believe the Americans are obsessed with their own technology, blinding them to the virtues of the MiG. They do not know that a pilot named Hay or Post is currently sitting in the cockpit of their precious MiG-21 aircraft, holding the stick and asking the control tower for permission to taxi. The investigation is about to move from the ground to the air. The engineers have had their laugh at the crude rivets. Now, the pilots have to see if this tractor can actually kill. The suspense at Area 51 is thick. They are about to light the fuse on a piece of enemy technology that was designed to destroy them. And the first question on everyone's mind is, will it explode when we hit the afterburner? February 1968. The skies above Groom Lake. The morning air over the Nevada desert is shattered by the roar of afterburners. From the ground, it looks like a standard training exercise, two specks dancing in the blue void. But inside the cockpits, a revolution is taking place, a revolution that will eventually cost the Soviet Union its dominance in the skies. In the cockpit of the F-4 Phantom, a veteran US Navy test pilot checks his radar. He is flying the most advanced fighter jet in the world. It is a 20-ton beast, equipped with powerful engines and sophisticated missiles. He feels invincible. His opponent today is the captured MiG-21 aircraft, piloted by a fellow American. On paper, this is no contest. The Phantom is faster, has better radar, and carries more weapons. The engineers who mocked the Soviet jet's crude rivets are watching from the ground, expecting the Phantom to dominate. Fight's on. The radio crackles. The Phantom pilot pushes his throttles to military power. He scans the sky, looking for the silver glint of the enemy, but the sky is empty. The MiG-21 aircraft is small, tiny, in fact. Its frontal cross-section is barely larger than the engine intake of the Phantom. At 5 miles out, it is invisible to the naked eye. Suddenly, the radar warning receiver screams. The MiG is not in front of him. It is already behind him. The Phantom pilot hauls back on the stick, entering a high G turn, trying to shake the Bandit. The massive American jet groans under the stress. He bleeds energy, his speed dropping as he tries to force the nose around. He expects the MiG to overshoot, to fly past him, unable to match the turn. But the MiG sticks to him like glue. The physics of terror. Up in the MiG-21 aircraft, the American pilot is grinning. He has discovered the secret that the Soviet designers knew all along. The MiG is not a complex weapon system. It is a hot rod. It is light. It accelerates with terrifying ferocity. When the Phantom turns, it becomes a flying brick. When the MiG turns, it maintains its energy just long enough to get a firing solution. The test flight reveals a horrifying truth to the US Navy. Their entire doctrine is wrong. They have been training their pilots to fight with missiles from long range. They assumed the enemy would play by the same rules. But the MiG-21 aircraft was not built for a polite missile duel. It was built for a knife fight. The American pilots on the radio are breathless, sweating, and frustrated. "I can't shake him," one pilot yells. "He's inside my turn circle. Every time I try to extend, he accelerates right with me." On the ground, the telemetry data is being fed into the computers. The analysts are seeing the numbers that the Soviets kept hidden in their safes in Moscow. They see the instantaneous turn rate. They see the acceleration curves. They realize that the agricultural build quality was a deliberate choice. The Soviets didn't care about drag reduction for cruising. They cared about raw thrust-to-weight ratio for intercepting. The rough skin didn't matter when you had an engine that could push you from subsonic to supersonic in seconds. The gnat and the sledgehammer. If the MiG-21 aircraft was a shock, the tests with the older MiG-17 aircraft are a humiliation. The MiG-17 fighter is a relic. It has no radar. It is subsonic. It looks like a cigar tube with wings. When the Project Have drill begins, the Phantom pilots are confident. They are flying a Mach 2 monster against a Korean War antique. The engagement begins. The Phantom comes screaming in at 600 knots, intending to slash through the sky and blast the slow MiG out of the air. The MiG-17 pilot simply waits. He watches the Phantom approach. At the last second, he banks the stick hard over. The MiG-17 aircraft turns almost 90 degrees in the blink of an eye. It is a maneuver that would rip the wings off an American jet. The hydraulic controls of the Phantom cannot react that fast. The American pilot flies right past the MiG, his targeting computer screaming in confusion. By the time the Phantom pilot can reset, the MiG-17 fighter has turned completely around and is sitting on his tail, lining up a simulated cannon shot. It's like fighting a gnat with a sledgehammer, a debriefing officer notes. You swing, you miss, and the gnat is biting your neck. The humiliation is total. The multi-million-dollar radar systems of the Phantom have trouble locking onto the MiG-17 aircraft near the ground because of ground clutter. The heat-seeking missiles can't track the MiGs, small engine exhaust effectively. And the Phantom has no gun. The American pilots realize they have been sent into battle with one hand tied behind their backs. The Soviet designers had created a plane that exploited every single weakness of the American high-tech obsession. They used simplicity as a weapon. The reverse engineering of death. While the pilots are sweating in the sky, the intelligence officers on the ground are dismantling the weapons. They pull the Atoll missile off the rail of the captured MiG-21 aircraft. This is the primary air-to-air weapon of the Soviet Union. The CIA and Air Force intelligence gather around the workbench as the technicians crack open the casing. They expect to find alien Soviet technology. They expect to find vacuum tubes and Cyrillic coding that will take years to decipher. Instead, they stare in silence. "It's a Sidewinder," one technician whispers. They look closer. The guidance unit, the servo layout, the infrared seeker head. It is almost a carbon copy of the American AIM-9 Sidewinder missile. The realization hits them like a physical blow. In 1958, a Taiwanese fighter had fired a Sidewinder at a Chinese MiG. The missile failed to explode and lodged in the airframe. The Chinese had given it to the Soviets. The Soviet engineers, realizing the genius of the American design, had reverse engineered it down to the last screw. This is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it is embarrassing. On the other, it is a breakthrough. The Americans know exactly how the Sidewinder works. That means they know exactly how the Atoll works. They know its frequency. They know its tracking rate. They know exactly what kind of flare will decoy it. The mystery of the deadly Soviet missile evaporates instantly. It is no longer a magical death ray. It is a copy of their own hardware, and they know exactly how to break it. Mapping the blindness. Back in the sky, the Red Squadron pilots are pushing the MiGs to the breaking point. They are not just flying them, they are trying to break them. They want to know what the Soviet manual forbids the pilot from doing. They find the fuel limit. The MiG-21 aircraft has short legs. After a few minutes of afterburner use, it is running on fumes. They find the stability issue. If you pull the stick back too abruptly at low speed, the MiG-21 fighter flips over. It departs controlled flight. It becomes a falling leaf. But the biggest discovery is the cockpit visibility. The American pilot in the MiG-21 aircraft realizes that he can't see behind him. The canopy design has a massive metal bulkhead directly behind the pilot's head. There are no rear-view mirrors that offer a clear view. He's blind at 6 o'clock, the test pilot reports. Totally blind. This is the golden nugget. This is the tell. In a fight, if a Phantom pilot stays directly behind the MiG, the Soviet pilot cannot see him. He has to bank the plane to check his 6. This bank creates drag. It slows him down. The Americans begin to draw a diagram. It is a kill box, a cone of space behind the MiG-21 aircraft where the Soviet pilot is deaf, dumb and blind. The atmosphere at Area 51 shifts from anxiety to predatory focus. They are no longer reacting to the mystery. They are solving it. They are building a curriculum. They are writing a new script for the air war. But knowing the secret isn't enough. They have to teach it. There are thousands of American pilots in Vietnam who are still flying the old way, dying the old way. The information at Groom Lake is useless if it stays in the desert. The project leaders make a decision. They cannot just send a memo. Pilots don't read memos. They need to experience the terror. They need to fly against the MiGs. The Have drill and Have Donut projects are about to transition from testing to training. They are about to create the most exclusive, dangerous school on Earth. The Soviet nightmare begins. Meanwhile, in Vietnam, the Soviet advisors are getting nervous. The anomaly is growing. A report comes in from a North Vietnamese air regiment. A flight of MiG-21 aircraft was engaged by US Navy Phantoms. The MiGs did everything right. They forced the merge. They tried to lure the Americans into a turning fight. But the Americans didn't turn. Instead, the Phantoms executed a vertical separation. They went straight up, using their massive engine power, the one advantage they had to stall out the MiGs. Then, as the MiGs hung helpless in the air, the Phantoms dropped back down, slotting perfectly into the blind cone behind the Soviet jets. The MiGs never saw the missiles coming. The Soviet commander in Hanoi reads the report and feels a cold knot in his stomach. The tactic was too specific. It was too perfect. The Americans didn't just win a dogfight. They dismantled the MiG's specific aerodynamic profile. They know, he whispers to the empty room, they know about the high alpha instability. They know about the rear visibility. He grabs a secure phone line to call Moscow. He needs to warn the design bureau. He needs to tell Mikoyan that their flagship fighter has been compromised. But what can he say? That the Americans have psychic powers? That there is a traitor? He doesn't realize that the traitor is the plane itself, currently sitting on a runway in Nevada, cooling down after another day of spilling its secrets to the enemy. The trap is sprung. The mystery is solved. Now comes the execution. 1969. The classified archives of the US Navy. The greatest weapon developed at Area 51 during the late 1960s was not a missile. It was not a laser. It was a book. After months of flying the captured Soviet jets until the rivets rattled, the test pilots and engineers of Project Have Donut and Have Drill compiled their findings into a massive top-secret technical volume. This document was the autopsy report of Soviet air superiority. For the Soviet designers back in Moscow, the existence of this report would have been a nightmare scenario. They operated on a doctrine of secrecy. They believed that if the West did not know the specifications of their aircraft, the West could not defeat them. They relied on the fog of war, but the American report cleared the fog. It was ruthless in its detail. It stripped away the mythology of the MiG and reduced it to a set of cold, hard numbers. The report revealed the specific, Mach-Tuck characteristics of the MiG-17 fighter, the tendency of the nose to pitch down uncontrollably at high speeds. It detailed the exact hydraulic pressure limits of the MiG-21 aircraft. It contained graphs showing precisely how long it took for the Soviet radar to warm up and lock on. The Americans now possessed the user manual that even the Soviet pilots didn't have. They knew the plane's breaking point better than the men who built it. The birth of Top Gun. The knowledge sitting in a safe at Groom Lake was useless if it stayed there. The Pentagon realized they had to download this data into the brains of thousands of young pilots who were about to deploy to Vietnam. This birthed the most famous experiment in naval aviation history, the Navy Fighter Weapons School, known as Top Gun. The timing was critical. The air war in Vietnam had paused for diplomatic negotiations in 1968, but everyone knew it would restart. The Navy had a window of time to retrain its fleet. At Miramar Naval Air Station, a select group of instructors, men who had flown the captured MiGs at Area 51, began to teach. They didn't just teach theory, they taught the flaws. They told the students, if you see a MiG-17 aircraft, do not slow down to fight it. It will eat you alive. Go vertical, drag it to 15,000 feet. Its engine will suffocate. They told them, if a MiG-21 aircraft is on your tail, do not panic. Pull a hard negative, G pushover. The Soviet engine has a gravity-feed fuel tank design flaw. If you push the nose down hard, the fuel floats away from the intake pumps. His engine will flame out. This was the shock waiting for the Soviets. The Americans weren't just planning to shoot them, they were planning to use the physics of the Soviet planes against them. They were going to bait the Soviet pilots into maneuvers that the MiG designers had never intended the plane to perform. 1972. Operation Linebacker. The trap springs. The bombing campaign over North Vietnam resumes. The skies are filled once again with the thunder of jet engines. But this time, something is different. To the North Vietnamese pilots and their Soviet controllers, the change is subtle at first, then terrifying. The American Phantoms are no longer flying straight and level. They are no longer firing missiles from maximum range and hoping for a lucky hit. They are aggressive. They are closing the distance. A flight of MiG-21 aircraft scrambles to intercept a group of phantoms. The Soviet advisors on the ground watch the radar screens, expecting the usual routine. The Americans will break formation, panic, and try to run. Instead, the phantoms turn into the fight. The MiG pilots are confused. They attempt to lure the Americans into a slow-speed turning fight, the tactic that has worked for 7 years. But the Americans refuse the bait. They keep their speed up. They slash through the formation, firing missiles within the heart of the envelope, the specific launch parameters validated at Area 51. Then comes the psychological horror. A MiG-21 pilot finds himself behind a Phantom. He prepares to fire his Atoll missile. Suddenly, the Phantom pulls a maneuver that seems suicidal. It dives, forcing the MiG pilot to push his stick forward to follow. The Soviet pilot doesn't know what the American knows. He doesn't know that the Phantom has a fuel system designed for negative Gs. He doesn't know that his own MiG-21 aircraft does not. As the MiG pushes over into the dive, the fuel in its tanks floats to the top of the cell, away from the intake line. The Tumansky engine coughs. It sputters. Then, silence. The flameout is instantaneous. The MiG becomes a glider. The hydraulic pressure drops. The controls freeze. The American pilot pulls up, loops around, and watches the helpless silver dart fall toward the jungle. He doesn't even have to fire a shot. He has killed the enemy with knowledge. The designer's nightmare. Word of these losses begins to filter back to the Soviet Union. The reports are chaotic. Pilots are claiming their engines are failing mysteriously. They are claiming the Americans are cheating. At the Mikoyan-Gurevich Design Bureau, OKB 155 in Moscow, the atmosphere turns to ice. The engineers look at the data. They see the pattern. They are exploiting the intake ramp schedule, a senior designer realizes, staring at a report of a MiG-21 aircraft spinning out of control. They are flying exactly at the edge of our stability limit. The horror sets in. This is not just pilot skill, this is espionage. The Americans are flying the MiG as if they have the blueprints. The Soviet designers realize that their secret weapon, the element of surprise, is gone. The specific quirks of their aircraft, the little engineering shortcuts they took to save money and weight, have been weaponized. The blind spot behind the cockpit? The Americans are parking there. The poor rearward visibility? The Americans are approaching from the low 6 position, exactly where the mirror cannot see. The engine restart time? The Americans know it takes exactly 45 seconds to restart a flamed-out MiG engine. They are timing their attacks to catch the pilot, while he is defenseless. The kill ratio in Vietnam shifts dramatically. Before the HAV drill and Top Gun training, the US Navy was trading 1 Phantom for every 2 MiGs. By 1972, the ratio skyrockets. In some months, it hits 12 to 1. For every 1 American jet lost, 12 Soviet-built fighters are burning on the ground. The declassification of shame. The final blow to Soviet pride comes not from a missile, but from a leak. The Soviet intelligence apparatus eventually confirms the existence of the Red Squadron in Nevada. They learn about the defectors. They learn about the captured planes. The realization is humiliating. The mighty Soviet military machine, which projected an image of invincible technological prowess, has been dissected by American mechanics in the middle of the desert. The designers at Mikoyan are forced to go back to the drawing board. They have to redesign the intakes. They have to add rear-view mirrors. They have to change the fuel pumps. But the damage is done. The psychological victory is total. The American pilots are no longer afraid of the MiG. They call it the little guy. They make jokes about it. They have demystified the monster. In the Pentagon, the generals are celebrating. The HAV drill project is considered one of the most successful intelligence operations of the Cold War. It cost a fraction of the price of a new bomber, yet it saved hundreds of aircraft and thousands of lives. But the story doesn't end with the Phantom. The success of the project leads to a terrifying new question. If we could do this with the MiG-21 aircraft, what about the next one? The Soviets are building a new generation of fighters. The MiG-23 fighter. The MiG-25 Foxbat. These are faster, deadlier, and more mysterious. The Americans at Area 51 look at their empty hangars and realize their work is not finished. They have tasted the blood of the enemy. They have seen how effective it is to steal the other side's playbook. And now, they want more. The cycle of theft and dissection is about to accelerate. The Cold War is entering a new phase, the phase of material exploitation. It is no longer enough to spy. You have to steal. As the Vietnam War winds down, the legacy of Project Have Drill is cemented. It proved that in the age of technology, information is more lethal than gunpowder. The Soviets built thousands of MiGs, but the Americans only needed a handful to find the key to destroy them all. The shock was not the weapon itself. The shock was the mirror. The Americans held a mirror up to the Soviet design philosophy, found the cracks, and shattered it.
October 1959. 320 nautical miles northeast of Iceland. The North Atlantic rolls dark and heavy under a moonless sky. Swells driven by autumn storms that have battered the Greenland-Iceland-United Kingdom gap for 3 straight days. 200 feet below the surface, USS Amberjack hangs motionless in the thermal layer, her diesel engines silent, batteries providing just enough power to maintain depth and life support. Inside the control room, the air tastes of amine scrubber chemicals and the metallic tang of recycled atmosphere. Condensation beads on cold steel bulkheads, despite the best efforts of overworked ventilation systems. The overhead lights have been dimmed to preserve power. In the red glow of battle lanterns, 23 men work at their stations with the disciplined quiet of submariners who understand that sound is the difference between hunter and hunted. Second-class Petty Officer James Whitten has been on sonar watch for 6 hours and 14 minutes. His logbook records the monotonous litany of ocean background, distant merchant traffic transiting the Denmark Strait, biological noise from migrating whale pods, the rhythmic crash of surface wave action transmitted through hundreds of feet of seawater. Whitten wears the BQR-2B passive sonar headset with one ear cup slightly off-center, an old submariner's trick that allows him to hear both the hydrophone array and any urgent voice communication from the control room without removing the headset entirely. His eyes track the pale green waterfall display, watching for the vertical striations that would indicate propeller cavitation or machinery noise distinct from the ocean's natural symphony. At 0342 hours, something changes. A low-frequency mechanical rhythm appears in Whitten's headphones, faint but distinct. Not biologics, not merchant traffic with its characteristic higher-pitched screw wash. This is deeper, more deliberate, with the regular cadence that speaks of military-grade propulsion. Whitten's hand moves to the gain control, increasing sensitivity on the bearing where the contact has appeared. The signal strengthens. Definite mechanical origin. Twin screws turning at approximately 90 revolutions per minute. Course approximately 270 degrees, heading west-southwest toward the gap. Speed estimated 7 knots. Depth approximately 150 feet, based on acoustic propagation characteristics. Whitten keys his communication circuit. His voice is calm, professionally neutral, betraying none of the adrenaline spike that comes with detecting what might be hostile contact. Con, sonar, new contact, designated Sierra 1, bearing 352 degrees. Twin screws, mechanical signature, consistent with submarine. Range indeterminate, signal strength moderate. Contact appears to be transiting westbound. In the control room, Commander Thomas Harper straightens from the chart table, where he has been reviewing the patrol orders that brought Amberjack to this exact position at this exact time. Harper is 41 years old, a career submariner who enlisted in 1936 and earned his commission during the war. He has commanded Amberjack for 26 months, long enough to know every quirk of her guppy-converted systems, long enough to trust his crew's competence implicitly. He crosses to the sonar station in 4 strides, his rubber-soled shoes making no sound on the deck plates. Harper does not immediately speak. He stands behind Whitten's station, watching the waterfall display, listening to the faint audio feed from the external speakers. 30 seconds of observation, professional assessment. The signal is real. The bearing is stable. The acoustic characteristics match intelligence briefings. Harper studied during the pre-patrol briefing at Submarine Squadron 4 headquarters in Key West 3 weeks earlier. Soviet submarine, likely diesel-electric based on the machinery signature. The twin screw configuration and the specific frequency range suggest a Zulu-class boat. possibly one of the 6 Zulu V variants that NATO intelligence suspects have been converted to carry ballistic missiles. Harper speaks quietly to his executive officer, Lieutenant Commander Robert Marsh, who has materialized at his elbow. "If that's what I think it is, we just won the intelligence lottery. Get the crew to tracking stations. Silent routine, no active sonar under any circumstances. We're going to follow this contact and see where he's going." The decision Harper has just made carries implications that extend far beyond Amberjack's pressure hull. The year is 1959, 14 years into the Cold War, 4 years after the Geneva summit had briefly promised détente, 2 years after Sputnik had shocked America into recognizing Soviet technological capability. The strategic landscape has shifted with terrifying speed. Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev has publicly boasted that the Soviet Union is producing missiles like sausages, threatening to bury capitalism through superior industrial production. American intelligence agencies are desperate for hard information about Soviet naval capabilities, particularly regarding submarine-launched ballistic missiles that could strike American coastal cities with virtually no warning. The GIUK Gap, the choke point between Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom, represents the most critical defensive line in the Atlantic. Any Soviet submarine transiting from northern fleet bases to the open Atlantic must pass through this relatively narrow corridor. American and NATO forces maintain persistent surveillance using a combination of long-range patrol aircraft, surface vessels, submarine patrols, and classified hydrophone arrays planted on the ocean floor. The mission is simple in concept, enormously complex in execution. Detect Soviet submarines attempting Atlantic transit, track them for as long as possible to gather intelligence on capabilities and operating patterns, photograph them when opportunities arise, and under no circumstances allow the Soviets to know they have been detected. USS Amberjack is perfectly positioned for exactly this mission, though her presence in the gap is not accidental. She is one of 52 American fleet submarines that have undergone guppy conversion between 1947 and 1963, transformed from World War II surface raiders into true underwater hunters, optimized for Cold War operations. The Guppy II modification that Amberjack received at Portsmouth Naval Shipyard in 1947 had streamlined her hull, doubled her battery capacity from 252 cells to 504 cells, installed a snorkel system allowing diesel operation at periscope depth, and upgraded her sonar suite and fire control systems. The result is a submarine that can sustain 15 to 16 knots submerged for over an hour, or maintain slower speeds for days if necessary, all while generating far less acoustic signature than the first-generation nuclear submarines that are just beginning to enter service. Harper understands both the capabilities and the limitations of his boat, with the intimate knowledge that comes from 2 years of intensive operations. Amberjack can outrun most Soviet diesel-electric submarines in short sprints. Her streamlined guppy hull generates significantly less flow noise than traditional fleet boat configurations. When running on batteries with diesel engines secured, she is quieter than USS Nautilus or any of the early nuclear boats whose reactor cooling pumps create constant broadband noise. But batteries are finite. At current load with main engines secured and minimal hotel services, Harper has perhaps 18 to 20 hours of battery endurance before he will be forced to snorkel and recharge, exposing a mast above the surface and risking detection by radar or visual observation. The decision calculus is brutal in its simplicity. If Harper commits to tracking this Soviet submarine, he is betting Amberjack's entire battery capacity on the intelligence value of the contact. If the Soviet boat is merely a patrol submarine conducting routine transit, the intelligence gain might not justify the operational risk. But if this is one of the Zulu V missile boats that NATO desperately wants to photograph and characterize, 18 hours of tracking could provide intelligence worth millions of dollars in Cold War currency. Harper makes his choice in the 30 seconds it takes to cross from the sonar station back to the chart table. He will track. He will follow this Soviet submarine for as long as batteries allow, or until the contact demonstrates capabilities that definitively identify it as a strategic asset. And he will do it without being detected, because detection would not only end the tracking mission, but would also inform the Soviets that American submarines are capable of trailing them undetected through their home waters. An intelligence loss, potentially more damaging than any gain from identification. The crew understands what is happening without requiring detailed explanation. Amberjack's officers and enlisted men have trained for exactly this scenario through countless exercises. They know the procedures for silent running, battery conservation, passive tracking, and the psychological discipline required to maintain operations for extended periods without surfacing or transmitting. They settle into their stations with the calm professionalism of men who have volunteered for submarine duty precisely because it offers these moments: the silent hunt, the patient stalk, the invisible war fought in darkness where skill and determination matter more than brute technological superiority. Lieutenant Commander Marsh moves through the boat on silent routine, personally verifying that every piece of loose gear is secured, every unnecessary system is shut down, every potential noise source is eliminated. In the engine room, the massive Fairbanks Morse diesel engines sit cold and silent, their warmth gradually dissipating into the surrounding seawater. The motor room hums with the subdued whine of electric drive motors pulling current from the battery banks, spinning the single propeller at minimal revolutions designed to maintain steerage while minimizing cavitation noise. In the forward torpedo room, 6 Mark 14 torpedoes rest in their tubes, loaded and ready, but with firing solutions unentered, because Harper has no intention of shooting unless Amberjack faces imminent destruction. In the crew's mess, men who are not on watch lie in their bunks, trying to rest, but finding sleep difficult with the knowledge that somewhere in the darkness outside the hull, a Soviet submarine is moving through the same water. The galley is secured except for the coffee urn, which remains hot because submariners run on caffeine as much as they run on battery power. The smell of old coffee mixes with the ever-present odor of diesel fuel, hydraulic fluid, and the sharp chemical bite of the CO2 scrubbers working overtime to keep the atmosphere breathable. The tracking begins in earnest at 03:55 hours. Witten calls out bearing updates every 60 seconds as the Soviet submarine maintains steady course and speed. Harper positions Amberjack on a parallel course offset by approximately 4,000 yards, close enough for solid sonar contact, but far enough to minimize the risk of counter-detection if the Soviet sonarman is competent. The American boat settles into what submariners call the trail position, following slightly behind and to the side of the target, using the target's own noise to mask any sounds Amberjack might generate. The mathematics of underwater pursuit are unforgiving. Sound travels at approximately 1,500 meters per second in seawater, but the speed varies with temperature, salinity, and pressure. The seasonal thermal layer at 150 feet acts as a partial acoustic barrier, bending sound waves in ways that can either help or hinder detection, depending on the geometry of the pursuit. Harper keeps Amberjack slightly below the thermal layer, using it to shield his boat from any upward-looking sonar the Soviet submarine might employ, while still maintaining good signal strength on the downward propagating noise from the target's machinery. For the first hour, the pursuit is almost routine. The Soviet boat shows no indication of awareness that it is being followed. The bearing drift is consistent with a submarine on a planned navigation track, probably following a pre-briefed route through the gap designed to minimize exposure to known NATO surveillance assets. The contact maintains 7 knots, a speed that suggests battery conservation rather than urgency. This supports Harper's assessment that the Soviet captain believes himself undetected and is conducting a standard transit rather than an emergency run. Harper uses this stable period to establish baseline acoustic data. He has Witten document every characteristic of the target's sound signature, the blade rate of the propellers, the frequency of machinery vibrations, any harmonic overtones that might indicate specific equipment. This information will be valuable to American intelligence, even if visual identification later proves impossible. Each Soviet submarine has unique acoustic characteristics based on manufacturing tolerances, equipment installations, and maintenance history. Building a library of these signatures allows American forces to track individual boats across multiple deployments. At 0445 hours, 1 hour and 3 minutes into the pursuit, the first complication arises. A merchant ship appears on sonar, transiting north through the gap. The freighter's screws create a wall of noise that temporarily masks the Soviet submarine's signature. Witten loses the clean signal for 47 seconds, tracking only on bearing rate and historical data. Harper makes a quick decision: maintain course and speed, trusting Witten to reacquire contact when the merchant clears. The gamble pays off. As the freighter passes, the Soviet submarine's signature emerges from the noise exactly where Harper's dead reckoning predicted. But the incident highlights the fragility of the pursuit. Amberjack is tracking on passive sonar alone, which means she has no precise range to target. Harper knows the bearing, the direction to the Soviet boat, but the distance is estimated from signal strength and propagation characteristics. If the Soviet captain makes an unexpected maneuver during a period when Amberjack's sonar is masked by other noise, the American boat could lose contact permanently. The crew settles into the rhythm of extended operations. Watch sections rotate on a compressed schedule, 4 hours on, 4 hours off, which is exhausting but necessary to maintain alertness during the critical tracking mission. In the control room, Harper and Marsh trade off command responsibilities. One always present to make tactical decisions, while the other grabs brief rest periods in the tiny captain's cabin. Neither man sleeps deeply. The responsibility of command does not permit genuine rest during operations like this. By hour 2, the battery's state of charge has dropped to 87%. Harper updates his mental calculations. At current consumption rates, assuming no high-speed maneuvers are required, Amberjack can maintain pursuit for approximately 16 more hours before reaching minimum safe battery level. That minimum is not 0. Harper must reserve enough power to clear the area at high speed if detected, to reach a safe snorkeling position, and to defend the boat if attacked. Running batteries to absolute exhaustion would be suicidal. At 0520 hours, 4 hours and 38 minutes into the tracking mission, the character of the pursuit changes dramatically. The Soviet submarine executes a sharp turn to port, changing course by 45 degrees and simultaneously increasing speed to approximately 12 knots. The maneuver is abrupt enough that it cannot be explained by normal navigation. Either the Soviet captain is executing a pre-planned evasion route, or he has detected something that makes him suspicious. Witten's voice carries the first real tension since the tracking began. Con, sonar. Sierra 1 has altered course to port, new heading approximately 225 degrees. Speed increasing, estimate 12 knots. Blade rate increasing proportionally. Classify as possible evasive maneuver. Harper's jaw tightens. The decision tree has just become significantly more complex. If he orders Amberjack to follow the course change immediately, matching the Soviet maneuver, he risks confirming any suspicions the Soviet captain might have by creating a correlated movement that even a mediocre sonar man would recognize as evidence of a tail. Submarines do not randomly turn in the open ocean at the same moment unless they are following each other. But if Harper maintains current course and allows the bearing to drift, he will lose contact within 30 to 40 minutes as the Soviet boat opens range and disappears into the acoustic clutter of the North Atlantic. Harper chooses aggression masked by patience. He will match the Soviet course change, but not immediately. He will allow 90 seconds to elapse, enough time to break the temporal correlation between the Soviet maneuver and Amberjack's response, then execute his own turn to a pursuit course that will close the range slightly while maintaining the offset geometry that has worked so far. Helm, come right to heading 230 degrees. Make your speed 6 knots. Smooth turn, no rapid course changes. Make it look like normal navigation drift if anyone's listening. Harper's voice is steady, conveying none of the tension that comes with knowing this single maneuver might determine whether the mission succeeds or fails. Amberjack comes right in a gentle arc, her single propeller biting into the water with carefully controlled thrust. The helmsman uses minimal rudder angle to avoid creating flow noise across the control surfaces. In the sonar shack, Witten adjusts his tracking solution, compensating for own-ship motion to maintain accurate bearing on the Soviet contact. The relative motion problem, determining the true course and speed of a target when your own platform is also moving, is one of the fundamental challenges of submarine warfare. The next 10 minutes are the longest of Harper's career. If the Soviet boat executes another radical maneuver, it will confirm that their captain suspects pursuit and is actively trying to shake a tail. If the contact settles back into steady transit, Harper can breathe easier, knowing the turn had been routine evasion rather than response to definite detection. 8 minutes and 40 seconds after the Soviet course change, the contact steadies on heading 220 degrees and reduces speed back to 7 knots. Harper allows himself a controlled exhale. Routine evasion. The Soviet captain is following a pre-planned route designed to complicate any trailing solution, but he has not definitively detected amberjack. The hunt can continue. But the Soviet maneuver has consumed battery capacity at rates Harper had not planned for. The higher speed required to close range during the turn drew current from the batteries at nearly double the normal rate. 6 minutes at 6 knots instead of 4 knots might not sound significant, but in the brutal arithmetic of battery-powered submarine operations, those 6 minutes have cost Harper approximately 45 minutes of total endurance. His comfortable 18-hour estimate has just become 16 hours, and every subsequent maneuver will consume more of that dwindling margin. Before we continue this underwater chess game, take a moment to subscribe to Cold War Chronicles. We explore the hidden conflicts that shaped our world, uncovering the technology and tactics that kept superpowers locked in silent competition beneath the waves. The Soviet submarine continues westbound, settling back into what appears to be steady transit profile. Harper orders the crew to 4-hour watch rotations, allowing men to rest in shifts while maintaining full coverage of all essential stations. The sonar watch changes, with Petty Officer Second Class Michael Torres relieving Witten. The new sonarman settles into his headphones, studying the waterfall display, learning the specific acoustic signature of this particular Soviet boat, so he can detect the smallest change in operating profile. Torres is 23 years old, from San Diego, and has been a sonarman for 4 years. He has spent hundreds of hours in training simulators, learning to distinguish submarine signatures from biological noise, from geological sounds, from the complex acoustic environment of the ocean. But this is only his 3rd time tracking a real Soviet submarine, and the first time the contact has been held for more than a few hours. His hands are steady as he adjusts the game controls, but Harper can see the slight tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes fix on the waterfall display with almost religious intensity. By hour 6, clear patterns are emerging in the Soviet submarine's behavior. The boat maintains course and speed with almost metronomic consistency, suggesting either very precise navigation or possibly autopilot control of steering and propulsion. Every 90 minutes, almost to the minute, the contact executes a minor course change of 5 to 10 degrees, zigzagging in a pattern that would complicate any fire control solution, while allowing the Soviet sonarman to clear baffles, the blind spot directly astern, where the submarine's own propeller noise masks incoming signals. Harper uses these predictable maneuvers to his advantage, timing amberjack's own course adjustments to occur during the Soviet zigs and zags, when any sound amberjack generates will be masked by the target's own machinery transients. It is submarine hide-and-seek played at the highest level of professional competence, a game where the penalty for losing is not embarrassment, but potential international incident and the loss of intelligence capability that has taken years to develop. The hours accumulate with the slow inexorability of battery drain. 6 hours becomes 7. 7 becomes 8. The crew settles deeper into the rhythm of extended submerged operations. Minimal movement, quiet conversation conducted in whispers, the constant background hum of ventilation fans struggling to circulate air that grows increasingly stale despite the best efforts of the CO2 scrubbers. The temperature in the boat rises slowly as body heat from 23 men accumulates in the confined spaces, and the cooling systems work to balance thermal signature against the need to remove heat from the interior. In the galley, the cook prepares sandwiches in silence, avoiding the clatter of metal utensils that could transmit through the hull into the water. The menu is cold cuts and bread, nothing that requires cooking or generates food odors that would make the already marginal air quality worse. Men eat at their stations, maintaining watch discipline, even as fatigue begins to accumulate from the extended period of heightened alertness. Coffee consumption increases. The head sees constant quiet traffic as the crew processes the coffee and the drinking water they consume to stay hydrated in the warm, dry air. By hour 9, Harper faces his first serious fatigue management problem. Lieutenant Commander Marsh reports that 2 members of the engineering watch are showing signs of exhaustion, slower reaction times, minor errors in logging procedures. Harper makes the decision to pull them off watch early and replace them with men who have had more recent rest. This reduces his reserve, manpower, the pool of fresh crew he can draw on if the pursuit extends beyond 12 hours. But immediate performance matters more than theoretical future needs. The battery state of charge has dropped to 62%. Harper updates his calculations again. At current drain rates, factoring in the reserve power he must maintain for contingencies, Amberjack has approximately 7 more hours of tracking capability before he will be forced to break off contact and proceed to snorkeling depth regardless of tactical situation. 7 hours might be enough, or it might not. Everything depends on whether the Soviet submarine surfaces or continues this steady underwater transit. At hour 10, Torres reports a subtle change in the target's acoustic signature. Con, sonar. Sierra 1, showing slight reduction in machinery noise. Estimate possible reduction in hotel electrical load. Could indicate they're securing non-essential systems. Harper considers the implications. If the Soviet submarine is reducing electrical consumption, it suggests their captain is also managing battery endurance, which means the Soviet boat is also diesel-electric rather than nuclear-powered. This supports the Zulu-class identification. But it also means both submarines are now in a race against battery depletion. Whichever boat runs out of power first will be forced to surface or snorkel, exposing itself to detection. Harper has bet that the Soviet boat will reach that point first, but there is no guarantee. The pursuit continues through hour 11 with the steady, grinding tension of a marathon rather than a sprint. Harper stands at the chart table, plotting estimated positions based on dead reckoning navigation. Without the ability to surface for star sites or radio navigation fixes, Amberjack's position is approximate at best. The inertial navigation system, a complex gyroscope array, drifts by approximately 1 nautical mile for every 8 hours of submerged operations. After 11 hours, Harper's position uncertainty is nearly 1.5 miles in any direction. At hour 11 and 42 minutes, the Soviet submarine's behavior changes again in a way that sends Harper's tactical assessment into immediate recalculation. The steady 7-knot transit speed drops to 4 knots. The contact descends from 150 feet to 230 feet, dropping below the seasonal thermal layer into colder, denser water, where acoustic propagation characteristics change dramatically. Torres reports the depth change immediately, his voice betraying slight concern at the tactical implications. Harper understands what is happening. The Soviet captain is either conducting a pre-planned passive sonar search, slowing down and going deep to minimize own ship noise while listening for any trailing contacts, or he has decided to lie quiet and see if anyone is following close enough to be detected during the slowdown. Either way, it is a tactical challenge that requires careful response. Harper orders Amberjack to match the depth change but maintain slightly higher speed, 5 knots instead of 4. This will gradually close the range over the next hour, but the closure rate will be slow enough that it should not create an obvious sonar signature. Make your depth 230 feet. Maintain current course. Reduce speed to 5 knots. slow deceleration over 2 minutes. I want this to look like natural drift, not a tactical maneuver. Amberjack descends slowly, the hull groaning slightly as the external pressure increases. At 230 feet, the pressure is approximately 100 pounds per square inch, well within the submarine's test depth, but enough that the crew can hear the subtle sounds of the pressure hull adjusting to the load. The temperature drops as they enter colder water. Condensation on the bulkheads increases. For 2 hours, hours 12 through 14 of the pursuit, both submarines move slowly through the deep Atlantic, engaged in a silent battle of nerves and technical competence. The Soviet sonarman is undoubtedly listening, searching for any anomaly in the ocean background that would indicate a trailing contact. Torres is doing the same, monitoring the Soviet boat while simultaneously listening for any indication that the Soviets have detected American presence. The tension in Amberjack's control room is physical, a weight that presses down on every man present. Harper stands at the chart table, hands flat on the navigation charts, staring at the plot without really seeing it. His mind is running through contingency plans. Marsh monitors the battery status, watching the indicators drop with mathematical inevitability. 54%, 52%, 50%. At hour 13, Harper authorizes a brief meal service, sandwiches and coffee delivered to all watch stations. Men eat mechanically, fuel for bodies that are running on adrenaline and caffeine. The cook reports that fresh water consumption has been higher than planned. If the pursuit extends beyond 16 hours, they may need to reduce water rations. Harper notes this but does not act on it yet. Water is a problem for tomorrow. Today's problem is staying undetected long enough to identify the target. At hour 14 and 27 minutes, the tactical picture changes with sudden, dramatic clarity. Torres reports contact ascent. Con, sonar, Sierra 1 ascending, current depth approximately 190 feet and shoaling. Rate of ascent consistent with controlled rise to periscope depth. This is it, the moment Harper has been waiting for. If the Soviet boat is coming to periscope depth, it almost certainly intends to surface or at minimum raise a snorkel to charge batteries. Either way, it will be vulnerable, exposed, potentially photographable if Harper can position Amberjack correctly. But the opportunity comes with risk. Periscope depth means shallow water, where sound propagation is different, where the risk of visual detection is much higher, where a single mistake could expose Amberjack to counterattack. Harper moves to the periscope well, already planning the observation approach. He will bring Amberjack shallow, trailing the Soviet boat by approximately 2,000 yards, close enough for optical observation through the periscope, but far enough to avoid visual detection if the Soviet lookouts are competent. He will raise the periscope for minimum time, 30 seconds maximum, taking photographs quickly before dropping the scope and going deep to avoid counter-detection. Make your depth 80 feet, slow rise, maintain current speed. Prepare to come to periscope depth on my command. Photography team to control room with the periscope camera mounting. I want this on film before he knows we exist. The photography team consists of a second-class photographer's mate and his assistant, both carrying the bulky periscope camera adapter that allows standard 35mm film to be exposed through the periscope optics. The camera is already loaded with high-speed black and white film, the only type that will work in the low light conditions of dawn observation. The photographer checks his equipment with practiced efficiency: film advance mechanism, shutter operation, lens focus ring. Amberjack rises slowly through the water column, ascending into the zone where grey dawn light penetrates from the surface, where periscope observation becomes possible, but where the risk of detection increases exponentially. Harper grips the periscope handles, waiting for the precise moment when Amberjack will be shallow enough for observation, but the Soviet boat will not yet have lookouts topside if it surfaces. Torres calls out depth readings: 150 feet, 120 feet, 100 feet, 90 feet, 85 feet. Depth 80 feet, sir. Trim satisfactory. The diving officer's report confirms Amberjack is holding steady at periscope depth. Sonar, What's the contact doing? Contact at periscope depth, bearing steady. No significant change in acoustic signature. Estimate range 2200 yards, based on signal strength. Harper does the mental geometry. 2,200 yards. Just over a nautical mile. At that range, the periscope optics will provide clear observation, even in marginal light conditions. But it also means amberjack is close enough that any mistake will be immediately obvious to Soviet observers. At 0647 hours, 16 hours and 5 minutes into the tracking mission, Harper gives the order. Up periscope, quick look, photograph and down, make it fast. The periscope slides upward through its well with a soft hydraulic hiss. The massive tube rises through the pressure hull, through the sail structure, breaking the surface with minimal wake. Harper rotates the optics, scanning the bearing where sonar holds the Soviet contact. For 2 seconds, he sees nothing but grey ocean and greyer sky. Then, exactly where the solution predicted, the Soviet Zulu-class submarine is surfacing, water cascading off its hull as it blows ballast tanks and rises into the cold Atlantic dawn. Through the periscope optics, in perfect morning light filtered through low clouds, Harper sees exactly what NATO intelligence has been searching for. The Zulu-class hull is unmistakable. The characteristic double-hull construction, the tall sail structure, the diving planes mounted on the sail rather than the bow. But this is not a standard attack configuration. Integrated into the sail, visible even in the low morning light, are 2 vertical cylindrical structures that can only be missile launch tubes. The tubes are approximately 2 meters in diameter, with hinged covers that are currently closed. The configuration matches intelligence briefings Harper received about the Zulu V variant. 6 boats converted from standard attack submarines to carry SSN-4 SARC ballistic missiles. I have visual confirmation. Zulu-class, ballistic missile variant. 2 vertical launch tubes visible in the sail structure. Start photographing. The photographer beside Harper clicks the shutter in rapid sequence, the motor drive advancing film with a quiet mechanical whir. Each frame captures a different angle as Harper slowly rotates the periscope. Hull configuration, sail modifications, launch tube doors, equipment layouts visible on the deck, antenna arrays. Every photograph is intelligence gold, visual confirmation of capability that will allow Western analysts to build complete technical assessments of Soviet ballistic missile submarine design and deployment patterns. Harper allows himself 22 seconds of observation, longer than doctrine recommends, shorter than he wants. Through the periscope, he can see Soviet sailors emerging from the forward hatch, beginning the process of rigging the boat for surface running. None of them look toward Amberjack's periscope. The sea state is working in Harper's favor. 3-foot swells that make the small periscope wake virtually invisible against the natural wave pattern. Downscope. Make your depth 200 feet. Course 280, speed 8 knots. Silent routine. We're done here. The periscope retracts smoothly. Amberjack's bowplanes angle down, and the submarine slips back into the depths. Behind them, on the surface, the Soviet submarine crew goes about their battery charging operations, completely unaware that American eyes have documented their most sensitive capability from less than 2,000 yards distance. But the mission is not yet complete. Amberjack must escape the area, reach safe waters for snorkeling, charge her own depleted batteries, and transit back to Key West with the film that will prove what they have accomplished. Harper does not allow himself the luxury of celebration. If Soviet lookouts spotted Amberjack's periscope during those 22 seconds of observation, the Soviet captain will immediately radio for assistance. Soviet Naval Aviation Patrol aircraft could be overhead within 40 minutes. Sonar, report all contacts. I need to know everything in the water within 10 miles. Torres studies his display with renewed intensity. Con, sonar, Sierra 1 on the surface, bearing changing slowly left to right as we open range. Faint diesel engine noise indicates he's running 1 engine to charge batteries. No other contacts on passive sonar. Ocean background normal for this area. Harper calculates rapidly. The Soviet submarine remains on the surface, suggesting the observation went undetected. But Harper cannot assume safety. He must put distance between Amberjack and the Soviet boat while conserving enough battery power to reach snorkeling depth in international waters. Navigator, plot a course to the nearest point where we can safely snorkel. I want us in international waters, away from known Soviet patrol patterns, with sufficient ocean depth to dive deep if we're compromised. The navigation officer spreads charts across the plotting table. Sir, recommend course 295 for 42 nautical miles. That puts us west of the Reykjanes Ridge in deep water. At current speed, approximately 5 hours transit time. 5 hours. Harper looks at the battery status indicators. Current state of charge is 41%. 5 hours at 8 knots will drain approximately 25%, leaving 16% when they reach the snorkeling position. That is cutting it extremely close. Reduce speed to 6 knots. That extends our transit time but improves our battery margin. Plot a track that keeps us below the thermal layer and away from major shipping lanes. The first hour of the escape transit passes without incident. Torres maintains sonar watch, monitoring for any indication that Soviet forces are searching for them. The ocean remains quiet, except for natural background sounds. The Soviet submarine they tracked for 16 hours has faded from sonar range, still on the surface charging batteries, apparently unaware of the American boat that documented their capabilities. At hour 17 of the overall mission, Harper faces a new concern. The air quality in Amberjack has degraded noticeably. The CO2 scrubbers are working at maximum capacity, but 17 hours of 23 men breathing in a sealed tube have elevated carbon dioxide levels to the point where crew members are reporting headaches and slight dizziness. Engineering, increase ventilation fan speed to maximum. I know it creates more noise, but we need to circulate the air more effectively. We're far enough from the contact that the additional noise is acceptable. By hour 18, Amberjack crosses into international waters according to the navigation plot. This provides a degree of legal protection. If detected now by Soviet forces, Amberjack can legitimately claim to be conducting routine operations in international waters. Prepare to come to snorkeling depth, up scope for visual observation, confirm clear surface, raise the snorkel, run one diesel engine at maximum charging rate, clear the interior atmosphere, then get back down to safe depth. Total time on snorkel, maximum 30 minutes. At 08:47 hours, 18 hours, and 5 minutes after initial contact with the Soviet submarine, Harper gives the order. Make your depth 60 feet. Prepare to raise snorkel. Amberjack rises slowly toward the surface. At 60 feet, Harper raises the periscope for a careful visual sweep of the surrounding ocean. The dawn has given way to full morning, grey and overcast with low clouds. Visibility is approximately 3 miles. The sea is empty. No ships, no aircraft, no visible threats. Clear surface, raise the snorkel. The snorkel mast extends upward, breaking the surface with its distinctive twin-pipe design. The head valve opens and the diesel engine starts with a deep, rumbling roar. The engine drives the main generator at full output, pumping electrical current into the depleted batteries. The interior fills with the smell of diesel exhaust, acrid, but also the smell of power being restored. Men breathe deeply despite the fumes, grateful for the fresh air displacing the stale atmosphere. At 15 minutes on snorkel, the batteries have climbed to 58% charge. Not full, but sufficient for tactical flexibility. The interior air quality has improved dramatically. Harper makes the decision to secure snorkeling and return to safe depth. Secure snorkeling, lower snorkel mast, make your depth 200 feet. Come right to course 300. Harper retires to his cabin for the first time in 18 hours. Before sleeping, he drafts a message that will be transmitted once Amberjack reaches waters where radio communication is safe. Mission successful, primary objective achieved, positive visual identification, photographic evidence obtained. Returning to base, no compromise. Amberjack sends. That message, once transmitted, will trigger a cascade of intelligence analysis. The film will be developed in secure facilities. Photographic interpreters will examine every frame. The analysis will inform NATO's strategic planning for years. If this deep dive into Cold War submarine operations inspired you, please like this video, subscribe to Cold War Chronicles, and turn on notifications. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from, or if you have family who served in submarines during the Cold War. Every like and comment helps share these forgotten stories with more people who need to hear them. This is Cold War Chronicles. We preserve the memory of those who hunted in silence beneath the waves. 3 days later, Amberjack approaches Key West under brilliant Florida sunshine. The crew has cleaned the boat, secured equipment, prepared reports. Harper stands on the bridge as Amberjack makes her approach. From a distance, the boat looks like any other guppy submarine returning from routine patrol. Nothing suggests this boat has just completed one of the most successful intelligence-gathering missions of the Cold War. As Amberjack secures to the pier, Harper sees the intelligence courier team waiting. They take possession of the film within minutes. The film will be on an aircraft to Washington within the hour. That evening, Harper and his crew gather for the traditional post-patrol dinner. Steak and lobster. The conversation is subdued. Harper raises a glass. To the crew of Amberjack, to 18 hours of professional excellence, to the mission we will never be able to talk about. The photographs will have significant impact on American intelligence assessment of Soviet ballistic missile submarine capabilities. The intelligence will inform naval force deployments throughout the 1960s. But the value extends beyond immediate intelligence gain. Amberjack's successful tracking demonstrates that guppy-converted diesel-electric submarines retain significant capability. The mission validates the guppy conversion program. The crew will eventually receive a Navy unit commendation, though the citation will reveal nothing specific. Harper will be promoted to captain 2 years later. USS Amberjack will continue serving until decommissioned in 1973, having served 27 years. For Commander Thomas Harper, the 18-hour hunt will be the defining moment of his career. The patience to trail a target for nearly a day without error, the judgment to know when to take risks, the technical knowledge to maximize capabilities while respecting limitations, the leadership to keep his crew focused, the courage to operate in contested waters where detection could mean death. These are the qualities that make submarine commanders successful. These are the skills that win the silent battles of the Cold War. The ocean is vast and dark and unforgiving. It has no memory of the submarines that transit its depths. But the men who fight those battles remember. They remember hours of patient stalking. They remember tension of operating on dwindling battery power. They remember satisfaction of mission success and relief of safe return. USS Amberjack's 18-hour hunt in October 1959 represents one small engagement in a conflict that spanned 4 decades. But for the 23 men who conducted that mission, the mission was anything but small. It was perfect execution of submarine warfare at the highest level of professional competence. This is Cold War Chronicles. If you found this account compelling, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you for ensuring that Commander Harper, his crew, and all those who served aboard USS Amberjack are not forgotten. The photographs remain classified even today. The mission files are sealed in secure archives, but the achievement endures. USS Amberjack tracked a Soviet ballistic missile submarine for 18 hours without being detected, obtained visual confirmation and photographic documentation, and returned safely with intelligence that influenced American naval policy for years. That is the definition of mission success. That is the legacy of USS Amberjack and the men who served aboard her. That is why we remember, why we preserve these stories, why we honor those who fought the silent battles that kept the Cold War from becoming hot. In the vast darkness of the North Atlantic, in waters that have long since erased any trace of the submarines that passed through them in October 1959, the memory remains. Commander Harper, tracking a Soviet submarine with skill and patience. Petty Officer Witten, watching his sonar display without error. The crew maintaining silent discipline. The photographer capturing images that would inform strategic decisions. These are the moments that define naval history. These are the achievements worth preserving. These are the stories that must not be forgotten.